14 new cyber vulnerabilities that cyber firm Forescout identified put critical federal infrastructure at risk. Those vulnerabilities could affect the security of online government systems. Rita Foster is infrastructure advisor at the Idaho National Laboratory. Rita, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
How were those vulnerabilities identified?
Well, we're partnered with Forescout on a project called Firmware Command and Control, funded by the Department of Energy. Forescout's working with other entities as well to understand the vulnerabilities for the communications that go on between these different end devices that represent the industrial Internet of Things. They discovered the vulnerabilities. They provided us a heads up on what those vulnerabilities are. We use our binary analysis, our structured threat work that we're doing, to analyze those vulnerabilities and understand that those vulnerabilities are not, those 14 vulnerabilities for InfraHalt is not the only thing. There's actually a whole series of vulnerabilities that we're able to model and understand how to protect against.
So then why should IT managers at federal agencies be concerned about these 14 vulnerabilities? What could happen?
What could happen with InfraHalt alone? What can happen is that an end device could have a distributed denial of service or a denial of service to that piece of equipment. They could also have interruptions in the communication between those devices. These vulnerabilities always change. The exploit capabilities always change. So you don't know what's going to happen in the future. That's why it's important to look at it more holistically with other communication vulnerabilities associated with these end devices to understand the better protections that you can provide.
Okay, but are these vulnerabilities found in systems that support critical infrastructure that the federal government either regulates or has their own systems directly connected to? I mean, could this affect our water supply? Could this affect our energy grid?
Yes, these vulnerabilities are in critical infrastructure. Preliminary analysis of the Shodan results show that these vulnerabilities exist in many places in the United States, in Canada, and there will be cross architecture. They are associated with the major control system vendors, but that's very similar to these other vulnerabilities as well. The big issue here is that most IT managers do not have this small little communication protocol stack libraries inside their asset inventory. So they kind of miss that in their normal cybersecurity defenses.
So what about federal contractors? What about these vulnerabilities in their systems? Because that could put federal systems at risk as well.
They can. I mean, vulnerabilities are just vulnerabilities. They have to be exploited. They have many vulnerabilities that are exploited have to go together for malware, for a targeted attack. So a vulnerability doesn't immediately mean, oh, they're going to have a distributed denial of service. There was some activities done with Forescout and others to prove out some of these exploits for vulnerabilities. But to get from a vulnerability to an actual impact does take more steps, which provides more time for the cyber defender. The contractors, the federal owners of critical infrastructure need to pay attention to these small vulnerabilities on these small protocol stacks, because they're very rarely monitored for these networks. Very rarely are they included, like I said, in the cybersecurity management. So they are very critical. It's a place where our adversaries know that they are not being monitored, and we're open. We have exposure with these.
So give me an example. Give me a doomsday scenario of one of these vulnerabilities being exploited. What happens? How does it play out?
Some of the earlier vulnerabilities, we've been tracking Urgent 11, Ripple 20, Amnesia 33, Numberjack, NameWreck, and InfraHalt. We've been working with these technology providers like Forescout, Splunk, Fortinet, Eclipsium, and we've been able to see that these companies are actually building detection and also mitigation areas. So at least there's guidance. I wanted to say that before I go into Doomsday. But some of these earlier vulnerabilities, their exploit potential has remote code execution, which is always a red flag for cyber defenders, because that means you can run some malware and it'll do whatever you want it to do. And on a little device, that malware can run, or it can just have a persistence that it can hide and then transfer and go move through the networks back to a bigger system where they may have larger impact, like a federal system, like a more of a control type of environment, like a supervisory control and data acquisition, or a larger distributed control system that would have a large area of like distribution control and electric grid, or water supply or other activities.
So what can federal IT leaders do to protect themselves from these vulnerabilities? In specific, what do they need to be doing right now?
The partnerships with their integrators, with their original equipment manufacturers are key. There's a big thing about supply chain vulnerabilities and supply chain management. It's really hard to have supply chain management if you're missing the key communications between the end devices that do the status and control of critical infrastructure. So having those partnerships, and again, we're seeing a maturity in these third-party technology providers where they're providing great tools to help you with detection to see if you have that vulnerability, if you have that exposure, and also provide really good courses of action. Hopefully, a lot of these systems are behind segmented networks that have authorized users only onto that network. That provides a lot of protection. But still, that information and those asset lists have to be updated with these small protocols that are normally ignored or just, an include filed someplace during implementation and forgot about.
Thank you so much for being on the program. I appreciate it.
All right.